Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Asha Curran, and I am delighted to welcome you all here this evening on behalf of the Bronfman Center for Jewish Life and the 92nd Street Y. It is now 5 days before an historical presidential election, the outcome of which will be decided in small but significant part by the votes of American Jews. We are very excited to welcome tonight a panel of some of the most influential and provocative of today's political voices to represent the diversity of Jewish thought on the election and to weigh in on issues that may be of concern to Jewish voters. I would like to note at the outset that the 92nd Street Y is a not-for-profit organization. We do not endorse any candidate or position on the election. We offer this program as public education and dialogue. We are also very glad to be broadcasting tonight's panel via our Live from New York's 92nd Street Y satellite program. Please join me in welcoming an amazing 26 locations to tonight's broadcast. We have organizations tuning in from Albuquerque, New Mexico, Allentown and Bluebell, Pennsylvania, Atlanta and Augusta, Georgia, Bridgewater, Ewing, and East Brunswick, New Jersey, Cincinnati, Ohio, Fort Worth, Texas, Tampa, Miami, Palm Beach Gardens, Boca Raton, Lantana, Naples, and Longboat Key, Florida. Providence, Rhode Island, Salt Lake City and Park City, Utah, and Scarsdale, New York, Scottsdale, Arizona, not done yet, Sherman, Connecticut, and Manhattan and the Bronx, New York. Please join me in giving them all a warm welcome. We will be collecting questions for the question and answer portion of tonight's program from our audience here in the house tonight, as well as from our remote locations. Without further ado, I would like to introduce tonight's moderator, Aaron Brown. Aaron is the Walter Cronkite Professor of Journalism at Arizona State University. The former anchor of CNN's NewsNight and formerly a correspondent and anchor for ABC News. We are so glad to have him with us tonight. Please join me in welcoming him again.
So I just thought I'd sit here and chat with y'all for a while. Let me introduce the people who will do the heavy lifting tonight. If they want to come out and take a seat, and we'll introduce them as we go. They want the whole introduction. Okay. I understand. There we go. Down at the far end, we're pleased to be joined tonight by Rabbi Michael Lerner. Rabbi Lerner has written much, including The Left Hand of God, Taking Our Country Back from the Religious Right. He is the editor of Tikkun, and he has a PhD from Berkeley, right? How'd I do? Mm-hmm. Bill Kristol is the founder and the editor of the Weekly Standard. Bill also writes a column for the New York Times, and I feel like we've been on a dog and pony show together because we've done this now a couple of times. Jane Eisner is the former editorial page editor of the Philadelphia Inquirer. She currently edits The Forward, and she is the author of Taking Back the Vote, Getting American Youth Involved in Our Democracy. And to my left is Ed Koch. He's New York. His latest book is the Koch Papers, My Fight Against Anti-Semitism, and it's nice to see you all. The topic is how Jews should vote. Before we get to that, I want to talk a little bit about how Jews do vote. My Russian immigrant grandfather, Sam the kosher butcher, said to me in 1960, I said, "How come you always vote Democratic?" And he said, "Because that's what we do." And I said, "Well, why?" He said, "It's not important, that's what we do." So for 48 years, I've been trying to figure out, why is that what we do? Michael, why is that what we do if, in fact, we still do it?
Well, it's what we do because the Jewish people are rooted in a set of values that have traditionally led us to identify with the struggles for social justice, for peace, for caring for others. And the Democratic Party in the past 40 or 50 years, while being a very imperfect embodiment of those values, has nevertheless been much more aligned with those values, at least since the time of the Depression. So I don't think it's true that Jews just do it because they do it. I think there's a choice, and I think that in 1980, when many Jews were dissatisfied with things that happened in the Carter administration, they did not give the same percentage of votes to the Democratic Party. I think Jews reflect on it, but we have a strong tradition that tilts us towards social justice and towards caring for the other, and the Democratic Party goes in that direction as well.
Bill, I assume you're not prepared to accept that social justice is somehow simply is simply owned by Democrats or the left or liberals or anything else. So why do Jews vote the way they vote?
Well, because of history, and history is hard to change. I mean, ethnic groups, religious groups do stick with when they make a big decision, as Jews made a big decision, and it was reasonable.
Well, there wasn't a big meeting.
30s.
I mean, how?
No, but there was a moment when Franklin Roosevelt, when the Democratic Party welcomed Jewish immigrants in the early part of the 20th century, and then Franklin Roosevelt led this country against Nazi Germany in the 1940s, and I think that cemented an awful lot of allegiance, appropriately so, of Jews to the Democratic Party. Whether they might have rethought things a little bit more in the last 60 years is, I think, a fair question. Some have. Younger Jews are more evenly split than older Jews, and obviously there are interesting splits within the Jewish community, Orthodox and others and the like. So, you know, I expect most of my fellow Jews will vote incorrectly again in this election. It's something I've gotten used to, and so that can get applause from both sides, so it's right, and something I've gotten used to. Every 4 years, I'm sort of the sacrificial lamb who tries to make the case for a Republican candidate to a Jewish audience, and I can't say I see much progress every 4 years to 4 years, but...
Well, but we admire the fact you're out there punching away, you know.
Futilely making the case, right?
Why do we vote the way are we still... Is it Michael's we vote on values, which I want to come back to, or is it Bill's we're still thanking FDR? Or is it something else?
Well, I think it's probably those things and more. You know, there's this classic saying in political science that Jews earn like Episcopalians and vote like Puerto Ricans. And it's true. And we are the most reliable white Democratic voters in the country, and even if the numbers slip a little bit next week, I don't think that's going to change. You know, a number of the surveys that have come out in the last few months have pointed to another idea that's related to what we just spoke about, but has to do with a sense of identity politics and identifying with whatever it is that one believes, in this case, the Democratic Party believes. And I've been thinking about that a lot as I've been watching the coverage of this election, especially the newfound fame of Joe the plumber, because you know I mean, I'll be honest, I just have a lot of it's hard for me to identify with Joe the plumber. If it was Joe the doctor, if it was you know, I don't know if it was Yossi the electrician, I would be there.
Yeah.
But and I do think that there's a way in which we are still predominantly a sophisticated urban culture that admires education, that admires community, and that still somehow feels very connected to this idea of a Democratic Party. And I think that it is true what Bill says, that younger Jews tend to be more conservative than older Jews. Actually, the Great Schlep should have been in reverse, like the Bubbies should have come up to New York. And but in fact, I think, you know, things may begin to change, but still those numbers, I mean, I would beg to disagree. I don't think young people are evenly split. The latest numbers that we saw still showed, I think, 67% of young people in favor of Senator Obama over Senator McCain.
67. Sorry. This could be a really long night. If every time somebody says Senator Obama, people clap at the end for Senator Obama, okay? Let me work here. Let me ask Ed the mayor. I think we all now have to be, I'll be Aaron the moderator, you'll be Bill the right, yeah. Do you think that this decision that there was this big meeting in 1936 that Jews got together and say, hey, let's vote Democratic, that FDR let us in, da-da-da, fought the war, it was really cool, pass it on, that it's a mistake not to convene another meeting, if you will, not to pass on a tradition with kind of reflexively?
I don't think it's simply reflexive. I think Jews have made a decision, other than Russian Jews who are, because of the government that they lived under, are very Republican. But
Russian Jews of this most current wave. Okay.
Yes. And Orthodox, very Orthodox Jews similarly are Republican, and there are reasons for it. But I believe that both Michael and Bill together have given us the reason why, and I'll just add to it. I have been an active Democrat for more than 50 years, involved with party politics, and yet I've crossed party lines occasionally, but not too often. And the reason I have been a steadfast Democrat is the Democratic philosophy, for me, and for most people I know, is that we will give a helping hand to people who need help, and that the Republican position we see is that I made it on my own, you're going to make it on your own. And there have been moments in time 4 years ago when I crossed party lines and actively campaigned for George Bush, and I have no regrets. I have listen.
I'm not sure if they're applauding that you have no regrets. I'm not sure.
Booze make me happy. Now, it knows I'm doing the right thing. And I have, when I supported George Bush, they sent me to Florida, and they sent me to Pennsylvania and Michigan, to all the Jewish areas. I am supporting Barack Obama. He sends me to Florida. He sends me to Michigan. He sends me to all of the same areas. I like to think I would be acceptable in non-Jewish communities, but nevertheless, I've been actively campaigning for Obama for reasons we can discuss later, and I'm happy with my political sojourn so far.
Thank you, Ed the Mayor. What is it, Bill, that in a sense you failed to convey, seriously, failed to convey, if you feel like you failed to convey it? I mean, maybe you think, hey, I've done as good as I can. I got 30 out of 100 or whatever.
Right, exactly. And I didn't mean to say that it's even among younger. It's more even among, or closer split among younger voters. I don't know, it's a very big question, obviously, and has to do with a lot of issues. I mean, I think if one were to, in my judgment, if Jews voted on the question of which party is a more reliable friend and supporter of Israel, I think the numbers would be very different from what they are now. But the truth is, Jews are not one-issue voters, or as someone once said, if they are one-issue voters, it's abortion rights, not Israel, for a lot of them. And on that issue, they're, of course, with the Democratic Party. So, if I had my way, I might urge Jews to vote more on foreign policy concerns, which I think would argue for the Republican Party, and I think would have historically, really, for a long time now, in terms of a strong U.S. foreign policy, which I think is an Israel's advantage. And on domestic issues, I think there would have been a quicker change, actually, but for the rise of the Christian right. Now, I think the Christian right is unfairly demonized, and this can be a whole other discussion, but it is just a fact.
No, actually, it's going to be part of this discussion.
Okay, but it's just a fact.
Yeah.
It's a political and sociological truth, I think, that an awful lot of Jews are, rightly or wrongly, made extremely nervous by the prominence of what they regard, well, let's say the Christian right or religious conservatives in the Republican Party. So I think this is just a hypothesis, but what might have been a faster progression towards the Republican Party in accord with just sort of a normalizing, let's say, of the Jewish vote in the 80s and 90s probably was halted by concerns about the Christian right. And of course, you see that in this election, where again, I think Governor Palin's been demonized as well, but it's probably true that McCain would be doing a little bit better among Jewish voters, except for the pick of Palin, or at least Palin's an excuse for Jewish voters not to cross the line to McCain and to be more comfortable with Obama and Biden.
You think it's an excuse? I mean,
yeah,
why,
I think very few people actually are changing their vote on Palin. I mean, Palin has become a very respectable way to say in certain circles, especially if you're allegedly...
I'm sorry, here's what I don't mean to... Well, I do mean to interrupt. Clearly, I meant to interrupt.
No, I'm sorry. I interrupted your interruption.
That's like when people go, quite frankly, you know they're about to lie. Let me be honest with you, Bill. Actually, this is all anecdotal. I can't support this in an empirical way, but I've talked to a number of Floridians in the last week or so, and they didn't need an excuse to vote for McCain. So there was no, it wasn't like Palin gave them some easy out to vote for Obama. I think they were genuinely, honestly uncomfortable with her, in part because of the Christian right or the religious right issue, in part because of other things. I mean, she's more than just that, and she has more pluses and frankly more minuses than that. So why do you say they need an excuse not to vote for McCain?
Well, no, fair enough. If they're making up their mind on that basis, that's true too. I'd say people I know, I mean, who are some of these conservatives who are now ostentatiously defecting to Obama, indeed a reason to justify it, have discovered that their horror at the thought that Governor Palin would be second in line. And I just honestly believe that most of them would have ended up having problems with McCain. I mean, there are legitimate problems with McCain in terms of Republican policies and philosophies, but the notion that it wouldn't have been a pro-life administration if McCain had been president, the notion that McCain isn't a moderately conservative Republican, the notion that McCain's Supreme Court picks are going to be different because Sarah Palin is in the vice presidency or not, I think that's a little fanciful. But look, if people, I'm not saying that some people didn't genuinely make up their mind, and I would just say, to the degree you're right, it sort of proves my point that there is, I think the prominence of religious conservatives in the Republican Party has become another obstacle for some Democrats who are attracted to the Republican Party on foreign policy grounds or on some domestic policy issues, another reason for hesitating to break from the historical pattern.
Okay. What I found a number of things interesting when we just went around the table here, but the most interesting thing is that no one said Israel first pass. So Michael, the rabbi, and because I believe Israel as an issue can actually cut both ways. I mean, it's not one way to look at what's best for American policy directed towards the Middle East. It's not one answer to that. Where does Israel fit in the mindset of American Jewish voters today as an issue, and who does it tilt towards?
Well, I think that most Jews really want to see a safe and secure Israel. I don't think there's any question about that. There's a huge difference, though, between those who think that the security of Israel depends on its continued domination of others and its military strength, and those of us who believe that Israel's best future lies in reconciliation and peace with the Palestinian people. And that's a very different orientation. And in general, I would say that there really are two worldviews at stake that are struggling inside the Jewish people, but not just in the Jewish people, but throughout the Western world. One worldview that says that that we are surrounded by hostile others, and that the only way we can achieve security for ourselves is to dominate and control those others before they dominate and control us. And the other worldview that says that we are in that actually we live in a world in which it is possible to build loving and caring relationships that will provide security, and that security will come at least as well, or at least in balance with, not to the exclusion of power, but at least in balance with a spirit of generosity and caring for the other. Okay. And with that approach for Israel, Israel would be more secure, and this is the view of many in the peace movement in Israel, Israel would be more secure if it has more spirit of generosity and caring.
Yeah. Fine, but let me what I'm trying to figure out is where Israel fits in the vote.
Both
whether
sides
you're going to
want-
vote Democrat or Republican,
Yes.
it doesn't matter to me for purposes of the question. I'm just trying to figure out, is it come right after greenhouse gases but before energy policy? Is it somewhere after abortion but higher than tax policy? Or is it number one with a bullet?
I don't think that people, most people, at least that I know in the Democratic Party, think that way. They don't have a list in which this is the priority, but that there are a series of issues that are extremely important to us, and one of them is Israel. But in saying that Israel is very important to us, how to support Israel, how to be pro-Israel, there's a huge difference, huge division in the Jewish people.
And that may well determine, how you answer that question may well determine which party you vote for. I got that part. Let me go this way this time. Is Israel the driver issue for American Jews and how they vote?
Well, I don't know about American Jews. I know about me.
Okay, how
and
about
I
that?
can say this to you, that I disagree with Rabbi Lerner, as I have over the years. And I was interested in the fact that there were not too many supporters in the audience, but that's not your fault. That's the district that we're in.
Ever the politician.
I don't live in this city. I live in California.
But let me say this. For me, I have to be satisfied that whoever is running for president will be supportive of Israel's security before I go to the many other issues that are very interesting to me. But what is important is that 4 years ago, I said that the Democratic Party and its candidate did not understand the threat of Islamic terrorism, and that George Bush did, and that I didn't agree with George Bush on a single domestic issue, and I said that publicly many times. But what good were the other issues if I had doubts about his willingness to stand up for the security? You don't know what I'm going to say, Rabbi. You keep shaking your head.
I shake my head at your position.
Okay, all right. So
I think making that choice was a disaster for America and a disaster for Israel.
Let me finish, if I may. Let me finish, if I may.
It's been a disaster for America.
I'm one of
This is like the old Arthur Godfrey show where it used to have the applause meter.
What is interesting is,
God, I love you guys, okay, but it's just not helping here.
I have, in every election, put myself on the line. I have crossed party lines, and I supported John Lindsay, and they put me on trial in the Democratic Party. What? I didn't care, because I knew I could beat him the next time round. But the fact is that issues are important. And this year, I said, because I accept the bona fides on the subject of Israel of both candidates for president, that the issues of the Democratic Party, whether it's abortion, fair taxes, Social Security, gay rights, a dozen issues, there's no question but that the Democratic Party, from my vantage point, is far better. And therefore, I'm free to make them, the domestic agenda, the reasons why I am voting.
But that's your first issue. Your readers. Mm-hmm. Do you have a sense of where this fits in your readership? Is it the mayor's threshold issue before we get to any other, or is it all these before we even get to slicing and dicing the issue itself, or is it all of the? Is it in this group of issues that we feel strongly about?
Well, I don't know that anybody can be as articulate as the mayor about this. I think that there does have to be a certain comfort level that Israel's security will be, a understandable concern on the part of a president, or frankly, members of Congress, or anyone in a position to care about that. I do think that that is, if it's not the most important issue, then it does have to be there. But our experience so far in the last few months in soliciting and engaging in conversation with our readers shows us that there are also a great deal of other issues that are important. We had a reporter in Florida last week who was just hearing over and over again that the economy was an issue, especially for elderly Jews. You can't escape that. There are also a great deal of even young Jews who are concerned about church-state issues and how that plays out, and all of what that means. And maybe that is, to some degree, what Bill was mentioning in terms of a worry, if not a fear, about Christian fundamentalism. So I think there has to be a comfort level with a candidate's position on Israel, and I think that's been shown in this election. I mean, obviously Barack Obama felt that he had to go to Israel to prove himself, had to speak before AIPAC, they both did. So that has to be there, but whether or not it's the make or break issue for most American Jews, I would doubt. You know, I've tried not to use the phrase "good for Israel" because I don't really know what that means, and I sometimes think that it's a code word for all sorts of things, and it could be a code word for saying I want to be really tough on foreign policy, or it could be a code word for saying I would like to see a more a small d democratic government there. I also think that we're at a point now where we're seeing a reevaluation of the Israeli-American relationship on both sides. Certainly the Prime Minister of Israel, Ehud Olmert, made a very big, very important speech a few months ago before he was like a really lame duck, and talked about this reevaluation, and you hear it on this side of of the ocean as well.
And what? Just give me one more sentence on it. What is it? How does it?
Well, I think there are people who think that the relationship has not taken into account the strength, the political and economic and social strength of Israel. Its ability to do things on its own or well enough that it doesn't need, this big sister all the time. And that that Israel and Israelis have much to teach us and help us as much as we help them.
That it ought not be as paternalistic?
I think so. I mean, I haven't heard those exact words, but certainly I think a much more mature, respectful relationship.
Bill, you obviously believe that one candidate, well, I assume you believe this. I don't know if you obviously believe this. One candidate where Israel is concerned is significantly better than the other. Is that fair, that you believe that?
Yes, though I also agree with Jane that I don't think I go around saying I don't like the good for Israel, and I don't like telling Jews how to vote. I mean, people should vote on what they think is the best policies for the United States. And in my case, I'm a hawk on U.S. foreign policy, and part of being a hawk these days, it wasn't always the case, I guess, but part of being a hawk these days, and this is very true of John McCain, is being a strong supporter of Israel, not, I think, a bully of Israel, and not preventing Israel from withdrawing from Gaza if Israel wishes to. God knows the Bush administration had no problems with that decision when the Israeli public made it. But I think it would be better, from my point of view, for Israel. But I think it would also be better for the people of Iraq, and better for the people of the Middle East who are resisting Islamic fundamentalism, and better for the people of the states neighboring Russia. So it really is part, and I agree with Michael on this, actually, I mean, it's part of a broader dispute about American foreign policy, I think, more than a kind of specific, at least for me, issue of Israel.
Just tell us why. What is it what is it about Senator McCain that you find on this specific issue, Israel, this one issue, better than Senator Obama on this one specific issue?
Because I think the greatest, if you're talking about Israel, but I think this would also be true about about U.S. interests more broadly and the stability of the Middle East more broadly, including moderate Arab regimes and decent people in the Middle East, the greatest single threat now is this Iranian regime's acquisition of nuclear weapons. And I have greater confidence that Senator McCain will use the threat of force to empower his diplomacy, and if diplomacy fails, be willing to use force to stop Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons than I think a President Obama would. I don't know what President Obama would do, and if he becomes president, I will make arguments, publicly, obviously, in the magazine and elsewhere as to what U.S. foreign policy should be, and people presidents do surprise a lot, so I don't want to be at all pretending this is kind of an obvious black and white choice, and McCain will do X and Obama will do Y. But I would prefer to have McCain and the team that McCain would have around him than Obama and the team Obama would have around him. John Kerry, whom Ed didn't support in 2004, is a leading candidate to be Obama's Secretary of State. Joe Lieberman is a leading candidate to be McCain's Secretary of State. I prefer McCain-Lieberman to Obama-Kerry.
Michael, let me ask you the same question. What is it, I assume you believe that Senator Obama answers the question better on this issue for you. What is it that he would do better than Senator McCain would do?
I think that he's more likely to know that American foreign policy needs a balance between, on the one hand, strong military, and on the other hand, generosity and caring for others. He's more likely, and I've had this conversation with him, to back a global Marshall Plan, to have once and for all end global poverty, homelessness, hunger, inadequate education, inadequate health care on the planet, knowing that our security, in fact, the well-being of America in the 21st century, depends on the well-being of everyone else on the planet. This is a new consciousness that is coming into, there's more and more young people are getting it, and more people on the world are getting it. We are one planet. There is no way for us to achieve security without caring about the others on this planet, without dealing with the ecological crisis, without dealing with the starvation crisis, without dealing with the meltdown of the economy both here and around the world. So I believe that Senator Obama is much more likely to think in those kinds of terms, not being stuck in 19th century nationalist politics, but beginning to recognize our interconnection with the well-being of everyone else on the planet.
Okay. I am in fact not intellectually equipped to speak for Bill, but let me posit something here, that that you can agree, I can agree with you that we need to do more hearts and minds work, but I can agree with him that there are thousands of bad boys out there who we cannot talk off the ledge, okay? We can't educate them off the ledge. We can't, I wish we could. I'd be happier if we could. I really would. Mm-hmm. But I try and be in my politics practical. As a practical person, I don't think we can do it just that way. So I wonder if you at least acknowledge here that there needs to be a balance between Bill's or Senator McCain, or I don't mean to lay this absolutely on you, though I read your magazine enough to do it, his muscular foreign policy and your we are all of one world Coca-Cola foreign policy.
Well, yes, a balance, yes, but right now the United States is way out of balance. Right. It spends hundreds of billions of dollars for the one side, and very little in terms of dealing with the need to create a different set of relations with the peoples of the planet. So we need to rebalance, and to rebalance requires a different mindset. And I think that Obama has that mindset, and that McCain doesn't. Obama has the mindset of being able to see our connection to other people, to not feel that he must only cheer on the well-being of the United States when he recognizes that our well-being is connected to everyone else's well-being.
What are you hearing here?
Well, what is interesting to me is that what Michael just said is he's stressed that the United States, with respect to appropriations, favors Israel and doesn't do sufficient, from his vantage point, for the Arabs in Gaza and the West Bank. That's the way I read his statement. Now, it happens that, well, that's the way I read it.
Okay.
Then what is essential to be addressed is, one side, the Israeli, they want peace. The other side says we will not recognize you. We will not recognize any prior agreements, and we will kill you. Now, why should the United States provide that side that says we will kill the Israeli if we can? Why should they be supplied with monies and other things that will permit them to buy the guns to carry out that wish?
Okay. I don't want, if I may, I don't want to get lost honestly, in a debate over Israel here, but...
Neither do I.
I know you don't. And yet, you took the bait. So...
you mean he offered it to me?
Yeah, but you grabbed it. It's okay. But what I want to know is you're comfortable, clearly comfortable, that Senator Obama will find the balance between... No?
That's not the way I approach it.
Okay.
The way I approached it is the following. I'm not interested in which one of the two is, in the words of some of the other participants here, better for Israel in terms of money being supplied or other things that would be helpful to them. I'm interested only in reaching that point where they're acceptable, and then other issues come in. I happen to be for a two-state solution, and I don't think it's going to happen in my lifetime for a whole host of reasons. And I want to do all the good things in life that Democrats always say they want to do. But I believe that these other issues, which I enumerated before, and half a dozen more, are now central to the United States. And therefore, I have decided to support Obama, not on the basis that he's better than McCain on the issue of Israel, but that he's acceptable.
Right. Okay, I mean, he reached some threshold in your mind.
Correct.
Right. Okay. Now I want to. Do you think there's a generational difference here, by the way? I'm reasonably sure there is a split among American Jews, depending on whether they're Orthodox, conservative, or Reform, on how they see this. There's a difference in how they vote, okay? And I think there's a difference in where they place this. Is there a generational difference in how Jews see this issue and how they, or whether they vote on it?
Well, it's always hard to know what motivates a voter. What we do know is over the last decade or so, younger Jews have trended to be a little bit more conservative than their parents. This is probably due to demographics, because the two fastest growing populations of Jews in America are Orthodox and Russians, newly immigrated Russians. And they, as we said before, are the ones that are more likely to be more conservative. But these are not huge differences. And we are publishing a story tomorrow about this very issue, so I know the numbers are pretty fresh in my head, and I think according to the latest Gallup tracking poll, about 74% of older Jewish voters are favoring the Democrat, and about 67% of 67 or so. There's a reason I wasn't a mathematician. Around that number are favoring the Democrats. So the difference is 7–8%, a little more than the margin of error, but not huge. But it definitely does seem to be going that way.
And is this generally so, or is it just on this issue?
Which issue, about Israel?
Is it just the Middle East, or generally so? Are younger Jews more conservative on taxes, abortion, the Supreme Court? I don't know. You pick it. Do we know?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's so difficult to do that kind of polling that's accurate, because frankly, the numbers are so small.
I know, but we like polls whether they're accurate or not, so that's okay. I just you give me one poll, I talk about it for an hour.
I can tell you anecdotally, I mean, Bill and I both have had the pleasure of working with John D'Eulio, the political scientist at Penn, who often says that the plural of anecdote is not data. So if you will allow me to do anecdote and not data, I'll tell you what we've been hearing from younger Jews is Israel is really important, but that there also are, on the one hand, Jews who are favoring McCain because of economic and fiscal policy, and there are even Orthodox Jews who are favoring Obama because of social issues.
What do you find? What do you believe?
Jewish Americans are Americans, and they have all kinds of different views on issues and different sociological backgrounds. And I think, in fact, if you disassembled, let's take the younger Jews, I mean, I do think they're probably more diverse in a certain way. I think what Ed says actually is reflective of a sort of mainstream pro-Israel as a threshold test, otherwise Democratic, not necessarily some more liberal Democrat, some more moderate Democrat, of a certain kind of mainstream, you might say, Jewish opinion of one generation. I do have the sense among younger Jews it's more diverse, and I think the data would show this, though again I don't have it at my fingertips, but I suspect if one could find Jewish women with PhDs in sociology, psychology, and the like, they're wildly more liberal than their parents, actually.
Sure.
Some of whom are, Sam the Butcher and are a little more socially conservative and have voted for at least some Republicans, if not for Bush or McCain, maybe for Rudy Giuliani or Christy Todd Whitman or something. Whereas other younger Jews who have become socially more conservative and economically conservative, or probably, I know many of them are comfortable in the mainstream of the Republican Party. So I actually think it may turn out to be the case that even though one takes the aggregate data, there's sort of a Jewish vote. I suspect, as a practical matter, the Jewish community, as it's just become more American, frankly, and Americanized and diverse in all of where it lives and in its occupations and all that, is ending up fragmenting as the American public.
Yeah, that's one of the things I wonder about is if over time, as we have become more assimilated in the culture, as we've become more successful in business. I mean, Sam the Butcher, he's a real person, and he's a real immigrant, and he became Sam the grocer and sent 3 kids to college. I mean, there was the natural immigrant progression there. And I don't know the answer to this, whether the voting pattern of Jews has changed over time, or if it's pretty much point here, point there, what it's always been. Do you know, Michael?
I don't think there's been a dramatic change, and I think that the thing that you're talking about this difference between younger Jews, the 7%, I would believe would be accounted for by the larger percentage of younger Jews who've been attracted to Orthodoxy. And to understand that, I don't think we can talk about Israel as the relevant factor. I believe a central factor is the growing materialism and selfishness in this society, the hunger that people have for a framework of meaning and purpose that transcends the individualism and selfishness that dominates in the ethos of this society, and the desire of people to move back to religious forms that address the hunger for meaning and purpose. And I should add that the Democratic Party, and by and large the liberal and progressive forces, have been very poor on this issue. And that one of the reasons why we created Tikkun magazine was to try to help the liberals and progressives develop a spiritual consciousness about the importance of that hunger for meaning and purpose. And I believe that what is different in this election than any we've seen for 20 or 30 years is that the Democratic Party candidate is the first one who actually understands this spiritual dimension of human need, recognizes that as equally important to material needs, and that's part of the excitement around Obama amongst younger people.
I want to go ahead. Let me one thing then. Absolutely. I want to get to your questions and to the questions of our viewers around the planet. God bless the folks in Allentown for joining us. I didn't realize. I want to get to those, but let me hear you out, and I'll throw one more thing out there.
Footnote, just make an obvious point that I don't know that anyone would disagree with. I mean, I slightly resist, or we should be careful about all this aggregating of 67%, 70%. Those are true data, as John Delia would have said. But, you know, if a quarter of Jews vote for McCain, that's, I don't know how many Jewish votes will there be in this election, 3 or 4 million. So that's, you know, hundreds of thousands, maybe 1 million people. I mean, we sort of overdo it sometimes when we talk about the community believing this or the Orthodox. I know plenty of modern Orthodox people, friends of mine, who are quite liberal. I know plenty of secular Jews who are quite conservative. And we do sometimes overdo the kind of homogeneity of these different groups and numbers. The other point I would make, and this is more of, I suppose, a challenge to Michael, I just predict as an analytical matter that Barack Obama, and this is good news if he becomes president, as looks likely, will disappoint Michael Lerner and will be a much more traditional, and will make Ed Koch, I think, pretty happy, because he will be a more traditional mainstream Democratic president. And the truth is for all of the talk about how he's going to rebalance everything, he's in favor of increasing the size of our armed forces. He's not for cutting the defense budget. He sounds quite a lot. You could put a lot of McCain's statements and Obama's statements about Iran, about the willingness to use force in a pinch, about our support for Israel next to each other and not know which one was speaking. The truth is, except for the retrospective judgment of the war in Iraq, whether to go to war, and then the real-time judgment on the surge, I would say, you could make a case. I'm still more comfortable with McCain, but I understand how someone like Ed can make a case as a kind of hawkish guy in foreign policy that an Obama administration is going to disappoint Michael, which will make Ed happy.
Just let me say that I agree with Bill. Yeah. I agree with you very much on that. And what the difference here for me, I mean, I very much agree with that. I think the pressures in Washington, the pressures of people around him, the discourse of the inside the Beltway crowd, the pressures of a corporate media will have immense impact in pushing him in the directions that you say. However, what the Obama presidency will do is open up a level of hope for fundamental change that makes possible, and only possible, the reemergence of social change movements that may push him towards who Obama used to be 20 years ago when he was a community organizer.
Bill, I'm curious, have you written in the magazine this view that you believe that Senator Obama will govern more towards the middle? I haven't seen that part in the magazine. Is that in an upcoming issue of the magazine?
I've said that. I don't want to endanger the enthusiasm of all of his supporters.
Oh,
it's so deeply moving, you know, the high spirits of hope and change. I don't want to be the guy who shows up and throws cold water on it now. There'll be plenty of time over the next 4 or 8 years to throw cold, for people to experience what we've all experienced in public life, which is the disappointment of our hopes.
Right. I read it. I do read the magazine. I'd missed that part about maybe he won't be so bad. It must have been somewhere between he's a socialist. From Palm Beach, Florida, Barack Obama's relationship with Reverend Wright and Farrakhan have been well documented. Why would the Jewish community align themselves or itself, as it has, with a candidate's anti-Semitic tendencies, I think is what we were going for there. Would you like that one?
No, that's okay.
Okay.
The premise is wrong. You cannot say that Obama has demonstrated anti-Semitic tendencies. It's ridiculous. And you can't point to anything. It is part of that campaign that he's a Muslim and a whole host of other things that would make him unacceptable. I don't accept that underground slander.
I would just
You
say
want to bite the apple?
Yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous.
I'm surprised.
I'm not saying he has any anti-Israeli or anti-Jewish tendencies at all. I mean, I would never say that about Obama. There's no evidence of that at all. It is a true fact that Reverend Wright was his pastor for 20 years, and it's a true fact that Reverend Wright wrote and said the things he wrote, and it is fair, in my view, for a voter to take that into consideration about whether he wants to vote or he or she wants to vote for Obama or not. I mean, and I think the McCain campaign has made, I don't think it's probably not dispositive in the case of a huge majority of voters, and it's probably not dispositive in the case of most Jewish voters, because Obama is on record, he's been a senator, he's on record on a host of issues, and if you agree with him and if you trust what he says, you say, well, he had this unfortunate pastor and he didn't agree with that part of it, but he thought the church was admirable in other ways, and fine. But it's a legitimate concern, I think.
Michael, you want just a quick one here?
Just very quick.
You can walk away
quickly,
from
before I received smicha, rabbinic ordination, I davened in an Orthodox shul for 20 years, in which what was said from the pulpit I found repulsive. But in terms of the community energy and connection to God, it was terrific.
And can I ask you a question,
Yeah.
Michael? If you found it repulsive,
Yes.
why didn't you stand up and denounce who was saying it? I believe, in all honesty, that if the rabbi of my synagogue were to make anti-black, anti-Catholic, anti-gay, whatever you want to have as an anti there, I would get up and denounce him in the synagogue.
Well, in fact, and what makes you think I didn't?
You didn't tell us you did.
Yes, I did. On various occasions,
Not
I
here,
did.
tonight.
What?
Okay.
No, various
all right.
occasions in my synagogue, yes, I did make my positions very clear and during the service and so forth. But I also...
If you made that, and that's a fact, I withdraw my remarks.
Thank you. Jane, someone here in our audience here asks, assume pre-election polling remains unchanged. I'm trying to figure out which poll. Of the 7,000 who are out there, but McCain wins. How do you think the country will respond?
Wow. I don't know that I could speak for the country. I'm not even sure I could speak for myself on that question.
Well, speak for Mayor Koch then. Got to speak for someone
That's right.
here.
Well,
Speak for me.
I think, we've all expressed and felt our concern about polls, whether they go the way that you would like them to or not. I do think that this is, and I want to be careful here because I'm a journalist and our newspaper doesn't endorse candidates, and I may have my own personal feelings, but I do think it is fair to say that there is across the land a very deep dissatisfaction with the current administration, and a very big worry about what's going to happen in the future, particularly with the economy. And so I think to the degree that people feel that Senator McCain does not provide enough of a difference with the Bush administration, and he won, I think there'd be even a bigger concern about the future.
I'm having a feeling the questioner
What do you think?
was actually wondering about something else, actually.
Do you think the questioner was wondering about if Jews vote for Obama, where will they be in a McCain administration?
No, I don't think
Bradley
there's.
effect.
I think they're thinking if the polls look like it's an Obama victory lap, and it turns out that the country votes for McCain, what does it say about the country?
No, it doesn't say, look, I mean, Bush was 5 points ahead of Gore in the Gallup poll, like 7 points ahead of Gore in the Gallup poll 2 days ago, 8 years ago, and 5 points ahead on the Thursday before the election, and Gore beat Bush by half a point. Polls are both wrong, and voters change their mind, and undecided voters don't always make up their mind in the same percentages as decided voters. And in fact, in the primaries, Hillary Clinton always got more of the late deciders than Obama. So as a political science matter, honestly, as just analytically, I would think the race will tighten, that McCain will get more than half the undecideds, and will be closer to a 3-point Obama victory than a 7 or 8 point Obama victory. And I don't think it means that anyone's voting, it's anything more than, typically in presidential contests, the late break is towards the more experienced candidate. Ford closed strongly against Carter, who was the new, fresh face. Gore closed strongly against Bush. People forget that Bush was the inexperienced governor in 2000. Humphrey, the incumbent vice president, closed very strongly against Nixon, made up 12 points in the last 10 days. So it wouldn't be that surprising to have a 3, 4, 5 point move over the last week. And if it's really only a 5-point race now, then it could be pretty close on Election Day.
But don't you think it's different when either the incumbent or the person who's running is tied to the incumbent? I mean, the undecided voted in 1980, didn't they break more towards Reagan?
In Reagan is right. In 80 they got comfortable with Reagan and broke to Reagan. In 2000 they broke to Gore. In 68 they broke to Humphrey. In 76 they broke to Ford, all of whom were the incumbent president or vice president. So you can argue this one either way. And you know,
I believe that the question was, will the country accept that outcome?
That's exactly what I
Or
think.
will there be violence?
Well,
that's what's implicit there. I do not believe there will be violence. I believe the country will accept it. There will always be common criminals who will engage in sporadic acts of criminality, but the country will accept the decision, whatever it is.
Let me throw something out on this, since we're on this. I was talking on Wednesday to the state chairman of the Republican Party in Arizona. And I said, give me your best case. Give me your best case. And this is his best case. McCain loses the popular vote by 2 million, draws to an inside straight on the electoral vote, and wins it. Best case. How does the country deal with that?
I mean, look, I think there are better best cases, but
well,
Kerry,
that's his best
wait,
case, and you got to use the question
Kerry
you
was
asked.
within 60,000 votes of winning an election in 2004. 60,000 had moved in Ohio when he lost the popular vote by 2.5 million. So it is not out of the question. Gore, of course, won the popular vote by 500,000 and lost the electoral vote barely because of 537 votes in Florida. So it's not out of the question that you could have an electoral popular split. I'm not sure it'll go the way, it could go the other way, incidentally. But I think people are overdoing, look, voters will accept, I think, the legitimate outcome of the election. And people, even if Obama holds a 7 or 8% lead, what that will mean is that 70 million Americans will vote for Obama and 60 million will vote for McCain. I mean, there'll be a lot of people voting on both sides, and people expect these elections these days to be close. And I think, I agree with that. I think there'll be a widespread acceptance of the results.
Okay. We'll leave it. I just thought, man, if that's the best case.
No, that's not.
I wonder about the
He's
worst
too
case.
pessimistic.
He also, well, I'll tell you that later. From Broken Sound in Boca Raton. Why is that funny? I don't. Why should the Jewish vote be so important when it represents a small minority?
That's easy.
Okay.
It is because Jews, for whatever reason, their own decisions, God's decision, I don't know which, are located in very key states. And therefore, their vote, because it's their maximum vote, has a unique impact on the outcome.
I think also that this year what we've seen is a way in which the issues that appear to be important to many Jews are also issues that appear to be important to many Americans. There's really an alignment there. So, so much of the conversation about Israel and the Middle East has really been about Iran. Iran's a very big issue, no matter what side you're on.
Your language was not good. You said issues important to Jews and many other Americans. You don't see the error? I do. In any event,
I love my new editor.
It's very key. It is absolutely key that people understand when the question in their mind always is, do Jews have dual loyalty? And the answer is, they have the same feeling as Italians do, American Italians, as blacks do, about the countries of their origin, of their ancestors. We have that same right. In even greater understanding should be involved, because we know that when Hitler offered to allow the German Jews to leave Germany, if there was any country that would accept them, no country would accept them. And if Israel had been in existence, it would have taken every one of them, no matter what their condition. And that is why we have a concern. But every ethnic, racial, religious group has a particular concern.
Can I just make one analytical point about the question? It's not true that the Jewish vote is particularly important. I mean, to be honest, it's 2% of the population. Maybe let's give it a wildly excessive turnout and fewer people under 18, so let's call it 2.5%, 3% of the vote. Most of it is not located in swing states. Most of it is located in New York and then California, which are not swing states. The Jewish vote in Florida is substantial, but if John McCain could increase his percentage of the Hispanic vote in Florida by 3%, he would take that over increasing his percentage of the Jewish vote as a pure matter of mathematics, even in Florida. by 8 or 10%. So I'm not saying it's not important. If you have a really close race in Florida, it matters whether Obama gets 73% or 69%. But as a pure analytical matter, if you were a political scientist making a list of key groups, Jews would be very low.
Yeah, but it's damn important in this room. Mr. Kristol, this is a question from this room. Are you still, quote, shaking the pom-poms for Sarah Palin, end quote?
That wasn't my phrase, in case you think.
New Yorker, October 27th.
I like yeah, it's a New Yorker's phrase. I sort of like the image. It's not something
But there is this sense that you were pushing.
I was pushing Lieberman on the one hand, if McCain wanted to go one way, and Palin on the other. I like her, I respect her. Yes, and I still
Are you disappointed in her performance?
I'm disappointed in the McCain staff handling of her, and particularly the sheltering of her, which I think put ridiculous pressure on her at the beginning. But I think if you look at her interviews in the last few weeks, and if you look at her debate performance, I think she was fine.
Okay. Also a question, seems to have some mixed feeling about
I don't think
that.
I don't think Sarah Palin's going to help McCain here in Manhattan. I'll stipulate that.
I'm just curious where y'all are going to go with this. I mean, because this is my bias in all of this. We don't talk about it at all, or very little. Someone in the room asks, how important is the question of race in the election? It's amazing. I just put my 2 cents in. It's my only chance to do this. It's amazing to me, I think I said this in LA too, actually, when we were there, that we've gone through this campaign, this extraordinary, historic campaign, and we've barely, if at all, talked about race. So it's out there now. Michael, how important is race in the election?
Well, I think it's very important, and you've just pointed out how important it is. It's so important that nobody dares talk about it, even though it's a central issue in American society. The history of racism in this country has never been adequately addressed. It pervades, it remains the fact that African Americans are last hired and first fired, and that the current meltdown is affecting them more than others. And the inability to address that issue in any explicit way is precisely the importance of race. Race has been shushed up.
Does it disappoint you that Senator Obama has not talked more about race?
No, I think that I understand the politics of it, and I understand why it's politically correct for him to not do that.
And that doesn't disappoint you.
But well, I don't think my appointments or disappointments are important.
Like that to me.
But I'm saying my appointments or disappointments aren't the issue here. I do think that that all of us, or certainly many people in this room, have had conversations with others with whom the issue of Obama's race has been raised as a factor in how people are thinking about how they will vote. And it's certainly the case for that a very large number of young people in the Jewish world have had conversations with older Jews who have raised that issue to them. And that just is something that anecdotally is true.
In your view, actually, race has been talked about, just not very loudly. It hadn't been out there.
Not explicitly, and very often the issues. Look, we're talking about when you're looking at the hardcore of the conservative vote, it comes very much from those states that were the hardcore of the Confederacy, and look at the red states. There are code words that are used now that essentially reflect the inability of people to accept that they lost the Civil War.
I got you. I want to get everybody in this. How important is race in this whole thing?
Well, I think it's very important. I think we have short memories, though. I mean, Barack Obama gave an incredible speech about race.
This is a 2-year campaign. There was one speech on race. I'm sorry, but I agree, and he didn't want to give that speech.
But he did, and then would it be up to him to give the next speech?
Pardon?
Would it be up to him to give the next speech?
I don't run the campaign, and I'm just saying I find it fascinating I agree with Michael. This is the great American original sin issue. We don't talk about it. We don't know how to talk about it. We are terrified to talk about it.
Oh, that's ridiculous.
No, it's not.
All we do is talk about it, and in fact, what this contest, what this election shows, is how unimportant race has become in people's decisions. Do people think that Hillary Clinton would be 20 points ahead instead of Obama, or do they think she should be doing worse? There's actually a dispute among Democrats, I know, about whether Obama or Clinton would have been the strongest candidate. And in fact, Obama is running ahead, if I could just be simple-minded about this, Obama as the Democratic nominee is running ahead of the last two Democratic nominees who were not black, I believe. So there may be these old Jews that you think are having this conversation. We've just heard that elderly Jews, or at least Jews above 45, are voting 75-25 for Barack Obama. So I don't really think racial prejudice is tearing this country up. And these people who want to have a big conversation about it, we should be non-discriminatory, and we should not judge people by the. Well, I don't laugh about that. And we shouldn't judge people by the color of their skin. And I don't think race has played a role in this contest, because a huge majority of Americans are not racially bigoted.
All right.
Oh, right. I can say it because 65 million of them are about to vote for Barack Obama. That's how I can say it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Aaron, if I may, I think
Really,
there may
thank
be
you.
two different issues here. The first is whether.
So I love about doing Jewish audiences, very quiet, respectful. At some point, it becomes the dining room table, I guess.
There may be two different issues here. The question of whether or not white Americans will vote for a black American, or more accurately, a biracial American. That's one question. And we'll know that next week.
Well, there have already been many elections in which that's happened.
Exactly.
Let's just stipulate.
For president, for the highest office in the land. I think the second question that I hope will occur after next Tuesday is to think about how race still keeps us back as a nation, and whether it's racial attitudes that prevent us from really, having full kind of relationships at home or at work, or whether there are disparities that occur because of race. And yeah, in the best of all possible worlds, I would have loved for that to have been talked about in the election. But frankly, we're too busy figuring out wardrobes and other things like that. And that's the way we are. But I hope that whatever happens next week, we can get back to trying to figure out that sort of last big unfinished business.
I believe that we are living in a golden age as it relates to the absence of discrimination against many groups. I'm interested primarily in anti-Semitism, and the Pew Institute said it is now at 7%. I believe there's greater bias against Catholics. I don't really know that to be so, but the fact is that we have changed enormously. And Bill pointed out, and nobody seemed to accept it, and you should. How do you think Obama won the Democratic primary? He won it against a white woman, a woman who had enormous expectation of winning. But he won. He won in states that are near totally white in the far west. So to say that race hasn't been discussed is ridiculous. Anytime you put on the television, whether it's CNN or the others, they talk about the Bradley factor. Everybody knows what the Bradley factor is. The Bradley factor, they estimate, is a 5% loss in votes over those who have been polled and have conveyed their voting for Obama. So we do discuss it. And in fact, in the voting taken throughout the country with Hillary losing, illustrates that black people can defeat white people, and have.
I just like this question, okay? From Palm Beach, Florida, Bill, since you're the authority on Sarah Palin. Is Sarah Palin Jewish? I've read an article that her mother was born Jewish and born in Lithuania.
No, I can even answer that. We tried to check it out, and it's not.
Is this one of those things?
This is only because everyone turned. This is my friend Charles Krauthammer has when Dick Holbrook, Madeleine Albright, and about Hillary Clinton turns out to have a Jewish grandmother. There's that spate from 98 to 2000 when half the Clinton administration turned out to be part Jewish. And Charles decided that he would develop Krauthammer's law, which is everyone in public life, in prominent public life, should be presumed to be Jewish unless proven otherwise. Having said that, I think Sarah Palin's pretty close to the proven otherwise. Yeah.
That's right. But there is a rabbi in Michelle Obama's family.
There what?
There's a rabbi in Michelle Obama's family.
That's right.
So that goes to prove your
I don't know what to do with that. It's a big family. One of my neighbors from Scarsdale, New York, Mr. Kristol. While you speak of Jews as being scared of the religious right, how do you feel working with those who reject evolution and other scientific and historical truths?
I don't know. I don't really know if I'm working with that many of those people, but I feel fine, you know. My kids go to public schools in Virginia, a state of the old Confederate. Went to public schools in Virginia. They're all out of high school by now.
The real Virginia or the unreal Virginia?
No, that was well, there's statewide curriculum guidelines, but it's Northern Virginia, and they got a good education, so I'm not scared of Americans allegedly, you know, reactionary views on many of these issues. Do few people reject various scientific findings? Sure. Is that dominant in schools or in curricula? No.
Okay. From Boca Raton. How can some Jewish people, I'm going to get smacked here. How can, just a question, okay, I didn't think of this. How can some Jewish people who have experienced enormous discrimination and persecution for thousands of years refuse to vote for an African American candidate simply because he's an African American?
Well,
because it establishes, as someone said many, many years ago, not all Jews are smart.
It also, that's certainly true. It also establishes that being a persecuted people, or having had a history of persecution, I don't think most of us up here have been much persecuted, having had a history of persecution doesn't necessarily make you any better than people who weren't persecuted. It's one of the great, you know, myths and sort of I don't know what to say. I mean, you know, the notion that, well, Jews were persecuted and therefore have greater moral sensitivity than non-Jews, I'm not so sure that's the case.
Do you believe that that's the case, Michael?
I think that it's interesting to acknowledge that there are many groups who have been persecuted on this planet, and that many of them have not tended to identify with others who are persecuted. And what distinguishes the Jewish vote, let's say, in my view, is that although the persecution in and of itself is not sufficient to generate that, the persecution connected with a long literary tradition of our books, from Torah right through the Talmud, right through the long history of Jewish halakha, Jewish law, has always tilted towards a command that only in 21st and 20th century, late 20th century America doesn't get talked about much. And it is a command in Torah that says, "Thou shalt love the other." Yeah. Not just your neighbor, but there's a command in Torah that says you shall love the other. That combination of the persecution with a tradition that identifies with those who are suffering, that leads us on Yom Kippur to read at that very day when we're the most holy day in the year, to read in our Haftorah from Isaiah that says, God says to Isaiah, I detest your fast because you fast and then don't care for the poor, for the hungry, for the homeless. And so your fasting is disgusting to me. That's what God says, and we read it every Yom Kippur. There is something in that tradition which I think does tilt us in a particular direction, and the suffering is not sufficient, but it may have been a necessary part of that.
I just have this exquisite memory of Yom Kippur in 1963, and the rabbi's sermon was that Jews had a special responsibility to go south to register voters because we'd been there, as it were, and how profoundly shaping it was to me. I mean, I grew up in Minneapolis, okay? I mean, you know, it wasn't like there was a lot of black people running around, and but that connection of dots was profound. I think there's always stupid people. I mean, that's the truth. Otherwise, there wouldn't be cable TV. All right, we're at the end. Let me ask each of you, Mayor, how's this thing going to play out on Tuesday?
There is going to be a huge victory for Obama. And I can tell you, I've never seen in my 50 years the enthusiasm that exists, and I've been to other states as well as in New York, and when I was down getting an absentee ballot the other day, two people in the elevator said to me, the reason I'm getting an absentee is, the young woman said, I'm going to Florida tomorrow to help get the vote out. And the guy, they're both in their 30s, said, and I'm going to Pennsylvania to do the same. Now, they weren't doing it for McCain.
Jane, how's this thing going to play out on Tuesday?
I leave it to the pundits and the experts to figure that out. Here's what I'm personally just most interested to see if the promise of a large turnout by young people actually is realized.
So am I. Yeah. Because if it doesn't, it's going to turn out differently than he thinks it's going to turn out, actually. Billy, I thought you said 2 or 3 points.
I don't know. I mean, look, there's a wide range of outcomes, and I think we shouldn't, I think there is a wide range of outcomes. It could be an Obama, I think anything from an Obama blowout, a pretty big 8-9-point victory, to a McCain 1-point victory. I, of course, root for the latter, partly because I think he'd be a better president, and partly because I do look forward to walking around the Upper West Side and the Upper East Side on Wednesday if McCain pulls off a surprise.
I mean, you would be unbearably smug at that
exactly.
moment.
For one day, after everything I've been through for the last few months, I think we deserve it.
As opposed to. Michael?
Well, I'm a theologian, not a political scientist, so I'm not going to predict. What I want to say is that on Tuesday, I think you're going to see a huge sigh of relief as the people leave the dominance of a neocon-oriented presidency. A huge sigh of relief in this country. No matter who wins, people are going to be so happy to be past the Bush administration.
Those of us, it's always a privilege, I think, to do any event in this building before you all. It's truth. You're a wonderful, smart, engaged audience. And so if I may, for all of them, thank you for coming and being part of this. And thank all of you for participating tonight. I feel like some of us have been on this panel in one way, shape, or form for the better part of our lives, and it'll be nice to have it over and actually see if someone can govern, because that is the point. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.